I thank you a lot for joining this panel discussion. And we just had one question that referred to PhD candidates. And apparently open science affects the work of PhD candidates. So maybe we should consider their views. I would like to start with a very simple question. What does good science mean to you? Maybe it's not that simple as it sounds, but maybe we can just have an opening statement from each of you.
Well, hi everyone. From my perspective, I think open science, a good science is actually a scientific research that can address many questions of society or their needs because the necessity of their needs that they don't even aware of its need. So it's my perspective of good science.
So a strong connection to society.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Also, just like to add from Nadia is that the approach you take in attending to a scientific gap or a problem that you need to solve should be logical in such a way that someone else who were to look at your research would sort of understand. And I think your data that you work with should not be intentionally biased. That is also important. And also lastly, to add on to that is that its impact should serve to improve, advance research, but also the lives of the society and the environment as well.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with my peer PhDs, and besides that, I would like to add something that how easy can I get the knowledge? It's both from the way the people documentize or write their research results, and also can I get their research results in open source? Because I don't want to read the abstract, found, okay, this is relevant to my interest, and then I found I had to pay like $50 to read the full text. That I think so. That's why I come here. I think open science that's an important thing for research.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so not to go into too much nitty-gritty details, but I suppose it determines on how you define the word good. Is good for people, good for yourself, good for the university, good for science, good for the scientific field. However, yeah. So without going into too much detail around that, I suppose we're talking about impactful, verifiable, repeatable research.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it depends on good out of which point of view it contextualizes it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So we have two perspectives that focus a bit on the societal aspect, and two who are also looking at open source aspects. So how do you ensure the quality of your research?
When I see the output of my research have some good impacts on the societal life or environment or other stuff, I notice that, okay, my work is well and it helps others. For example, in my work that I'm working on that in my research, I'm working on public transport. When I see the output of my works helps a public transport company to, for example, reduce air pollution or helps to people have a better using of a public transport. So I see, okay, my work has a good quality and it helps others.
Mm-hmm. So this shows a bit why you have such a strong societal component. Yes. Does open data play a role in this context? So, because if you're speaking about public transport, so also other institutions, other organizations might be interested in that?
Yes, well, with sharing this data or this knowledge, help others, companies or other, I don't know, researchers to use this knowledge, to extend it or use it in other ways. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are there other opinions?
I think quality research I think some of the things you touched on in terms of being transparent, because you can research on something, have a hypothesis of some sort, and you find that what you thought you would do did not produce the results you expected. But what is important is ensuring that when you explain your methods, you are explicit and you are not trying to sort of be elusive and not try to explain what happened because you know what you needed to expect. I think quality, it's not necessarily on the results are good. It's on even my results were bad, but the reason that they were bad, it's because of this and that and that. So you're able to explain in such a way that if someone else were to use your data, were to have the same, be in the same environment or the same space and do the same thing, they'll probably get similar results, you know, so yeah.
You were speaking about good and bad results. Can you elaborate more on that? May I ask if you ever had bad results?
Yeah, and in most cases, bad results are sometimes because I didn't think thoroughly about the method I was taking, or I didn't understand exactly what I needed to do. So I'll have to sometimes go back and think again about how do I make sure that my method that I'm taking is clear, you know, and sometimes by understanding the method itself, even when the results I think they are bad, if I'm trusting the method, then I'll be confident in those results, even though I think they are bad. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I also have the same opinion that for the research results, reproducibility is quite important. And besides that, in terms of quality, I think it is also important that I understand every key point in my research, in my methodology. I gave a good reason. I can explain why I did this decision. And even the result is bad, I can explain why this is unnecessary. This is a necessary evil in my research, and I have to take that. And after all, I think it's also important that my result to be checked in multi-perspectives, and that is why I think peer review is kind of the last guarantee to ensure the quality. It's not only from me, but from my peer PhDs, my supervisors, all the other the reviewers. That's truly important.
I showed you, at the beginning of this presentation, I showed you a couple of open science principles. Can you say a bit which of these open science principles apply to your work?
Oh, sorry, I missed that part of your presentation.
Yeah, so open science was about open access to scientific articles, to open data, to open source software and code, to open hardware. It was about open educational resources, citizen science, participatory science.
Yeah, so I think the open articles, they actually relate to because I want it to be reviewed by the readers, right? And also the open code, because others want to know how do I get this result, and they want to reproduce it. So yeah, open science does help in quality assurance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so not to rehash too much has already been said, I suppose I'll summarize it with a large focus on transparency, that you want to be as transparent as what you're doing. I mean, we are all still PhD students, not PhD graduates, so that means that we're still learning how to do this to a certain extent. We're still inexperienced and we're gaining that experience. So to a great extent, it's relying quite heavily on your supervisors and your supervisory team, more so at the start, and I assume less so at the end, to guide you through it and to kind of imprint on you what it means to produce high quality and good science. But so again, yeah.
Andra, please, I have another question for you. Do you want to
I actually quickly wanted to add that what also drives the quality is the data that you have.
Yeah.
So sometimes you find that the data that you have is not good quality data, so obviously it would have an impact on the findings that you get.
Okay. So in my presentation, I made this, maybe it's a bit bold, a bit of a bold statement to say that open science can help to counteract fake news and science deniers. What's your point on that? So do you agree with that, or is it a bit too much to ask for open science? Or in other words, are fake news and science deniers still possible if we do open science?
So the second part of the question, I believe, yes. I mean, fake news would always be possible. The nefarious always find a way. But in terms of your first component, first part of the question, yes, I believe open science or open access to science, or whichever avenue you take of it, does allow people, if said science is properly contextualized, does allow for the greater public to have access to better knowledge or more knowledge in order to combat fake claims and fake news and bad science, if we're allowed to use that terminology. Does that answer your question satisfactorily?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I think yes and no. First, of course, open science can help to deny some fake news, but for the science deniers, I doubt if they will read any scientific result, even you put it open. They just believe what they believe. Maybe Trump, but yeah, it's hard for them to read the result.
Well, I think accessibility to information is important, because people can create opinion based on credible sources. So in that aspect, I think open science can help greatly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think open access, open science helps to distinguish fake news from real news. But for some fields, I think people can trust open science more. For example, in these days, we faced with COVID-19, and all vaccine companies, they share their papers about these vaccines on open science. So in these times, people can trust them, and they understand it's not fake, and the other when they have access to these articles, they can do more research to understand, is it a fake opinion or not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the only one asking questions. Other questions from the audience as well to our candidates? There's one, and there's one.
Thank you. This was already raised by, I think, by Chris as a concern, but I would like to hear from you as PhD students. Do you think documenting your output when you have published your result, documenting this work would really add extra burden on your shoulder if you want to make your paper and your data open access? Do you think this is going to affect your work, or do you see it actually as a big burden on your shoulders, or not?
I think this for me, it's always good to build a very good structure of my data produced, my figure produced, and also the way how did I do the research. In this way, I can always show to my supervisors that on which step I am, and I also can show them what did I do. So it does cost some time to documentize everything I have to build a structure, but it helps. It kind of enhanced the efficiency of my full research. So I think it is necessary to do this, and it's helpful, it's more positive.
I think when I'm done with my PhD, I can have the time to package the data and show it. But while I'm still busy with the data and I still have other objectives I need to attend to using the same data, I'm not comfortable with openly sharing that data because I think there are a lot of PhD students here who know the anxiety of hoping that nobody publishes what you are currently working on. So if you were gonna put your data out there while you're not done with your PhD research, then that anxiety will increase. I don't have a problem with sharing data, but I think maybe after you feel you've exhausted because you never finish researching using data. So, but when you feel personally that you've done what you needed to do, you have your PhD or you have findings that are sufficient for you to get your qualification, then yeah, can openly share.
I suppose it comes back down to your supervisory team again. I think as a young PhD, or young rough term, as a PhD student at this point in time, you're kind of sitting in a situation where you don't always particularly know, right? So what you're being taught is kind of your standard or your departure point. Now, I have to be honest, in terms of coming into the program, there's been a significant amount of focus into properly planning out and properly structuring your data and your thinking, your algorithmic designing and your scientific designing in such a way that it makes it easier to publish it in an open source environment, and there's enough access to training programs such as the software carpentry course that was more recently that helps you out with getting comfortable with GitHub and all of these different platforms. So yes, certainly I think that the new way that we are being inducted into the PhD programs does enable us, out of a time commitment and out of a planning commitment and out of a strategic point of view, to be a little bit more geared towards it, so it doesn't have too much of an implication on our time. However, I do agree with your statement that depending on what field of research you're doing and the competitive environment around it, that there is concern towards, will my software be scooped up? Will somebody else outpublish me? So yes, I suppose there's a bit of a strategic, and again, you reference back to your supervisory team on that I kind of assume that's some form of their responsibility to help guide you through that, at least in the early parts of it.
Well, from my opinion, before I shared my data in my research, because it wasn't sensitive data, but now my research is about preserving privacy, so the data that I'm working with that is sensitive. And based off that, I cannot maybe share it very easily. And maybe after I preserve the privacy of that data, I can share it with others. But for now, it's not possible. And at the end, I agree with Andrea. It's depends the supervisor's team, everything.
There's a comment by Frank. Or maybe we can take the person before first.
I'd like to turn the table 180 degrees, to be honest. The whole discussion has been about releasing data, publishing open, and archiving. I'm interested in hearing your opinion about reusing open data, so going for data sources that other publishers or other researchers have published before you. Do you do that? And if so, how? And if not, why not?
So that's actually quite applicable to the specific study that we have in mind for my PhD. And due to the way the world's changed in the last 2 years, access or the ability to generate data has changed fundamentally. Being able to access certain parts of the world is a geopolitical active, dynamic environment, more so now than I suppose it was a couple of years ago, arguably. So having access to certain areas, being able to gather data in certain areas has changed. The ability to do so, the quality of your data capturing or gathering will change. Should that dynamic reality of life impede our ability to progress in science? No, I don't think it potentially should. So based on the back of that argument, if somebody else has published data and they haven't used it for the specific reason, so I have a different application for their data is still applicable, it forms part of a greater data set or additional part to a data set, then I don't particularly see any problem. Of course, there's the necessary procedures to go through and referencing and acknowledgement, but I think the scientific world has gone through the necessary, jumped through the necessary hoops and standardized that process well enough that you can acknowledge and can acknowledge somebody else's ability to generate data and you have a different opinion or different view of it. I think that should be okay.
Yeah, we can also skip to go to the next question. There was one more.
Okay, so after the 36010, I don't know whether my question was still, because it takes us back to where we were before the 360. What I deduced from this discussion from the start up till now is one critical thing that probably is not very highlighted. And that thing is data security. The sentiment being expressed here is that people feel that the data that is being given probably may be used in a way that is not intended to. And that brings us to a very critical discussion that I think that most of these things should focus on. What are the data sharing agreements that exist within this space? So that if I trust these data sharing agreements and there are implications for the use of this, for the wrong use of this data, then I am a bit confident to say that, oh, okay, I can share that data with you. So I think one of the key things we should be looking at is that what are the data sharing agreements within this space? And then what happens if, let's say, somebody uses for the wrong, and then we can trust the system by listening to or looking at some of these things. So thank you.
So part of the data management course addresses that question. And there's quite a lot of literature around exactly data agreements and data security and so forth. And again, I take Nadia's point where you're dealing with certain level of data, the anonymization thereof, and the security around it. And we have GDPR, and in South Africa we have POPI rights agreements in different countries, different types of arguments, and it's a nightmare to try and navigate it all. And I believe at some point in time you're going to have a data security law expert profession coming out of it. I don't know. The argument is it is a valid concern. I do think there is a significant amount of documentation around it to try at least navigate it. Is it a headache? Yeah, absolutely. Is the security a problem? Yeah, sure it is. Is the storage thereof? Yeah, it is. But I don't think they're insurmountable at this point in time. I do see how it can easily become so. I think we are running into a world where data security is becoming more and more of a problem. We see this continual attacks on large financial databases, etc. So yeah, it is a problem. At what point in time does scientific data become a target? I suppose it depends on the type of science that you do. So I think at some point in time, your anonymization of data will become at a far earlier stage in your research to try and protect yourself from other people using your data. And then I think when you actually publish your data, the contextualization of your data becomes incredibly important. So adequately providing metadata or context to what your data is and what it's useful for and what is the strengths and weaknesses and perceived limitations of your data set. If you adequately document that, I think you adequately protect yourself in terms of somebody using your data for the wrong reason or outside of its potential design. I don't know if that potentially answers your question in a roundabout note. Okay.
All right, so I think we are running out of time. I thank you all for your participation in this panel discussion. I thank you for your attention. And yeah, it's time for the next part of the program.